Okay, we're at the Revenue Enhancement Committee meeting. It is December 19th, 2012, and beginning at 7 o'clock. Those of us that are here from the board are Connor Kurtz, Frank Sermonero, Monica Hamill, Michael Wolf, and Michelle Goss, and Dr. Otto. And what I want to say to the public is we are open for comments, but we will, if they get a little lengthy, we might shorten them a little bit. But you are welcome to stand up at the podium and express your opinions. We're going to start with the biggest reason for this meeting is to discuss options about how to maintain activities in Daniel Boone School District. And we are not here to make any decisions. We're just here to see what options we have to outline possible plans for the future. So tonight we're not making decisions, we're just talking about things. And we're going to start out with Michelle Goss. She has put together a PowerPoint presentation about the sports department.
Thank you, Malcolm. I put together just a brief PowerPoint of some ideas that may help defer costs, and I'm just going to talk to you about them and throw them out there. The objectives of the presentation is the goal of the presentation, budget options, and reviewing questions at the end. I would like to present options for budget cuts regarding the Daniel Boone Athletic Department, and with that comes along the extracurricular activities, as far as clubs, bands, things like that. I don't want people to think that I'm just up here levying for athletics, because that's not. I'm here for everybody.
Right.
Just option one that I've been thinking about is just digging into the budget more, reviewing the budget to evaluate and refocus the spending. One example is the football laundry. Maybe just things like that we pull out of the budget that we no longer need to pay for. That was just one example off the top of my head that I had. There are, I believe and feel that there are some other areas that we could pull from to lower that number ultimately. Some ideas for option two would be to bring revenue in to the district, obviously from outside sources, corporate sponsors. That's one option. Raising activity fees would be another option. Having all sports camps for the community and surrounding areas that would be run by myself and some of the coaches within the program at Daniel Boone. I think that would be a great way to bring in some revenue over the summer. We could hold those camps and offer the students, offer them athletic IDs, where at the beginning of the year the athletic department pushes for them to, it's a pass to get into events. You charge, we would have to figure out the numbers and all that, but just ideas. But you charge a certain amount, and they get into every home sporting event with that ID pass that they have. It's just a little bit more revenue that we could bring in through something like that. Continuing with the revenue as far as covering athletics and extracurriculars and things like that. The gate fees from the athletic departments when we sell tickets at all the gates. I have, excuse me, I've made some contacts down south with other athletic directors, thinking that, not saying anything bad about them, but they don't really have a lot of money in their school districts down there. So I have made phone calls to their athletic directors. I have gotten ideas from them. So it's something that we can, obviously throw around and think about those ideas from those athletic directors. Another idea would be transportation would be provided for one way for the sporting events in the Berks County area. not outside of Berks County. The parents would be responsible for getting their kids home from that sporting event, carpooling, things like that. I'm not sure with what the liability is. Like I said, these are just ideas. So, and the conclusion is, one of my goals as the athletic facilitator is to ensure each athlete has a positive experience I had as a student and athlete of the Danbury School District. The community and district can work together to make it possible for students as an alumni, and the athletic facilitator is my privilege, and it's my desire to do everything that I can to make that happen for the students at Danbury. So that's pretty much all I have right now, and just any questions that you may have about anything that I can help you with.
I just do want to make a comment myself, just for the benefit of the press is here and interested citizens. When you look at the overall athletic budget, if we're talking, again, you heard us a lot talk about math problems the other night. This is a big math problem again. We spend every year $700,000. I want to say that again. $700,000 on all of the extracurricular activities that we do. That's everything. So when you saw that budget cut that we used in that math problem to balance the budget, $700,000, I know it doesn't sound like a lot in a $50 million budget, but it really is. It's almost a mill when you translate it around in terms of taxes. So when we look for people to potentially get involved in that, it's a big involvement. It's not just $1,000 here and $1,000 there, and a car wash here and a car wash there. That's not the solution that's going to help us. I mean, those things are all great, but we're talking about Andrew uses the word a lot, a big nut of money. This is a lot of money, and we are looking for creative solutions. We are looking for ways to try to, as Monica said, and we've talked off the record, but looking for long-term solutions rather than having this firestorm every January and every December about what's going to happen with the sports program. Because if we don't, we're going to be having this kind of conversation every year. So some of the things that we've done budgetarily that the board is discussing is the board asked us to itemize everything that falls into that $700,000. And when you look at it, for example, I'll just read off, you look at the French club. Well, that person makes $1,500. Well, that doesn't sound like so much. And then you look at the announcing club. Well, that's $1,500 for that stipend. Well, that doesn't sound like so much. But when I read to you that all of the activity advisors, when you add them up at the end of the day between salaries and expenses, is $163,000, that starts to sound a little different. Okay? We've taken it and we've broken down every sport, its cost, its equipment. So when you look at one sport, for example, I'm just going to pull out high school boys bowling, $2,827 for, I'm assuming that's including the stipend and some of the other associated costs. That in and of itself doesn't sound so bad. But then when you add all of the sports up at the end of the day and all of those activities together, the grand total for all sports is $541,000. We have a very, very comprehensive program, and it is not an inexpensive program. So trust me when I say we're here to get very serious about what we can do to try to save it, but understand it's a lot of money. So with that said, I'll open it up. I think it's important to keep all of it in a context in terms of money, because at the end of the day, that's what drives this whole boat, this whole ship.
Michelle, you mentioned that you had some thoughts and ideas on how to cut some costs. Like you gave an example, maybe the laundry for the football team uniforms and some others. Did you have an opportunity to dive down deep enough to identify each of those and how much potential savings that would be?
Just off the top of my head, I would think for laundry it would be a couple $1,000s.
Or for all the thoughts, I mean, are you still going through that exercise? You haven't gotten to the point?
No.
And then you had also mentioned some maybe potential revenue opportunities over the summer, right, with camps. And any thought on what kind of dollars that could generate? Have you gotten that far yet to think through it?
It would all depend on how much. It would all depend on how much you would want to charge per kid to attend that camp, the offers that you give them for that charge. And
What would the
things like
camps be?
that.
What would you think they would be?
I would just be thinking like field hockey camps, softball camps, baseball camps. Just
Basically,
things
all the
like that.
sports love to have camps because it creates that year-round atmosphere that high school sports has gotten into. So just about anybody could have a summer camp. You could even have a basketball camp in the summer. I mean, those possibilities, I think, are only limited to the amount of sports you have.
Have you actually talked to coaches that would be willing to do a camp?
I've talked to a couple, yes.
Okay. And have they run camps before?
Yes.
Would that fall into the current stipend, or would we paying them overtime? Or
No.
would it be,
They would just be doing everything. It would be going over and above. They wouldn't get paid for it.
See, camps don't fall under our jurisdiction.
Okay.
When they do those kind of things, obviously we would work out a situation with a facilities use because they're a school group. We would probably waive the fee, but then you have to look at what money are they making on that, and then how does the school want to negotiate potentially getting some of that money. It's really like a mini business plan that you have to have for each one of those situations. Cover your overhead costs. I'm sure some coaches wouldn't mind volunteering their time. Others might want to say, you know what, I want to get paid for doing that. So you have to factor that into what you would charge
that's
the
what I'm trying
kids.
to figure out. Is it included in the stipend that the district is paying, or is this your?
We don't generally run those, do we? We just give up the
Or are
facility.
we
I don't
suggesting
think-
we run them?
We're suggesting we take the income, right,
I
from
don't
the camps?
think they should get a stipend from the district though to run it.
Okay.
That's not.
We have a
The
comment?
softball team is actually running a camp. It's going to be 3 days, and it is $20 a day or $50 for all 3 days. And according to I think it came out in Tuesday folders, it was ages 5 to 12. 14. Okay, 14. And it was the coaches and the team that were running it. And I thought that was a great idea.
But then does that money go back to just that team?
Well, right
How
now
does that?
they're using that. I'm sorry, I didn't even.
Well, I didn't know where the money was going. I saw
Right
it
now,
and I said that was a great idea.
they're using that as a fundraiser for their team to buy things like equipment and things that they would need.
And I guess what I'm trying to figure out with looking at everything, I mean, when I'm looking at activities, band, I mean, all the activities, if we were to try to keep them in Daniel Boone, that's what I'm really trying to accomplish, not to just do a fundraiser here and there, which is great for that team, but it doesn't solve the $713,000 problem.
One of the things
And
that just occurred to me is I think there actually our cost of the program, if we were to take, I know the boosters clubs donate a lot of time and money and effort and supplies and this and that to our program, that we don't even factor into that $700,000. I would imagine if we began to add in what's already been contributed in-kind money and in-kind services, the cost of our sports program and activities program is well over $700,000. They're already defraying some of that cost. And you guys that are here that do that can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think a lot of parents and clubs are already dumping a lot of money into the system.
Well, the clubs really fundraise for themselves and really have done a lot of that work unto themselves. The kids work extremely hard to raise money for uniforms and other things that they need. They come to the booster organizations for extra things, really. When you say,
Sorry.
$700,000 and then you mentioned $500,000, the deficit of that $200,000, is that covered by the activity?
No. $500,000 is sports. The other 100 or 200 or so is activities.
Okay, and what does, when we add for our activity fee, pay to play, whatever terminology you use, where does that bring that number?
The net is, because if you remember, if you were at the budget meeting, we said the total cost is this. But if you factor out what the activity fee is covering, it's about a $485,000 amount. Because you have to, if you cut the whole program, when you balance budgets, you have to work on revenue and expenditure sides. So the expenditures that we lose would be $485,000. The revenues that we lose would be another $125 or some $1,000. I don't have the figures written down here, but it totals about $685,000. Because if you don't have a program, you're not collecting that revenue, so you have to take that money out of the equation.
So the net cost on sports and activities is $400 something.
Well, because we're defraying the costs with the activity
I want
fees.
to know pretty much.
But the
how
real
much money
cost,
do we
the
need?
real cost is adding those two together. So you really don't want to break that down. The real cost of the program is almost $700,000. It's just that right now, the public, the students participating are picking up about $120,000 of that $685,000.
Activity fee is not likely to go away, from what I
Well,
understand.
that's the board's call.
So I think so if that isn't going away, then the number we're really dealing with is less than 700,000, from what I understand.
Well,
Yeah,
what
that's
I,
what I wanted to understand what that number is. If it costs 700, but you bring in 120, so now.
All that money is doing is covering our costs. We have $685,000 of costs.
Right, but there's a net number there somewhere.
That-
If you,
Let me say it this way. If we didn't have that activity fee, we'd have to find another $120,000 in our own budget.
right, so what I'm saying is, I'm trying to find out that, what the real, because let's just say, if you got rid of all sports, now you got rid of the activity fee, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
So, if it costs you $700 or whatever $1,000.
Just use that as a round number. That's a safe number.
$700,000. But you bring in 120 to help pay for those sports, so
Right.
now your cost is 580,000.
That's correct.
It'd be
Now,
less
do
than
you-
that. It'd be
No,
less
they'll-
because
here-
Not the
then I
whole
have it.
120 is made up from clubs
Correct.
and music programs. and
Correct.
sports.
So the number even gets, so what I'm saying is, do you have the number also, what about the gate at football games? What that number
I-
is that you don't have, that
I
now
have-
comes in as revenue, you're taking that off.
I-
Or the gate for basketball.
Yeah, we track all that. We have all that.
What is that number?
This is how much.
That's what I think the important number is.
well, according to the most recent spreadsheet I got, was the net total for all sports, and this was taking the activity fee out. Is that correct, Michelle? It was $445 plus $1,000. So it's $445, $816,000 just for sports. What I had done was exactly what you said, put in what I had given, received as some of the gate receipts. When you kind of work it all through, it still came out to $411,000. So it wasn't, and these are just my figures. This isn't the business office
Right.
figures. I just took them and started working with.
So I'm saying
But that's
the true
just
cost
for
of
sports.
Running the sports, the true cost is $411, not $700, because you would lose
Well-
all that. So the true cost.
But we're not just trying to
The true cost
maintain.
is 700,000.
Yeah, the true.
But we're bringing in revenues to defray that. The cost is 700,000.
So I'm
But
just saying,
this
the
has
money
all
you
the-
quote unquote lose
Yes.
is $400,000.
Correct.
It's not
Correct.
700 because you're bringing in.
We're bringing
that's the
in-
number.
But that's only for sports. Now the activities.
Well, let me say it this way. If we had not had the activity fees,
Would have been.
it would have been
But
$700,000.
we
But we
do.
do.
But we do.
Correct.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I just don't want
What
to.
it costs.
I just don't want to print it in the press that it only costs us $485,000 to run our sports program.
No.
It is $700,000 just about.
But you freight it.
But you have to freight some of those costs.
That's exactly why we instituted the activity fee. Yes, you are correct.
But I'm just trying to help figure out, in my mind,
Right.
gaps to now cover up not 700,
Understood.
cover up 400.
Understood.
So is
That's
that,
Right.
That's right.
That's a way to. That's one way to think about it.
But the band other activities still run $163,000.
They're also covered by the activity fee, so that's
So-
all in one
They're
group.
included in the 400.
But
Right.
those are separate. These are two separate amounts that I got from that spreadsheet. This is one spreadsheet, and then the other one is sports.
But
So
they're in the same pot.
okay.
They're in that. Let's say
Oh,
it
they're
this way.
right.
They're in that $700,000 pot.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, he was trying to separate
Right.
the two, but
Right.
So to net that out, to save all the activities that cost us $700,000 a year to run, we've been able to come up with 100 and something thousand. So we need to come up with another $400,000 in order to
That's another way to
keep
say it.
everything running.
right.
Right?
On top of the
Exactly.
activity fee.
Yeah.
Okay.
correct.
That's
Mhm.
that's the whole. That's the whole. It's about 400,000.
That was every club also?
I believe.
Yes.
At every club.
700, 400 is every club, every...
Anything, the way we've worded it, anything that's extracurricular,
We have
which I can just give you examples to help you figure out what that might be. The announcing club, the DBYEA advisor, the German club, the French club, the FBLA club, all of those things does that help? That fall under that realm? Right.
Yes.
I just wanted to give you an idea of what's included in that list.
Has this been published yet?
Pardon?
Is that listing been published yet?
No, it's not. I mean, it's not that it's a secret, but it's just any club that you have up at the high school or at the middle school or somewhere in the district falls anything that's extracurricular. We can certainly, publish a list, but there.
Dollar breakdown, is that available?
No, we haven't. That hasn't gone out yet.
Well, not the budget in the not 13, 14 numbers, but the previous budget numbers are.
Well, we haven't. We don't actually break. I mean, they would be available at some point if someone wanted them. We're not really disseminating them at this time. I mean, they're not a secret, but they're just not out there in any publishable form right now.
What about upping the activity fee a little bit?
Well, we actually talked about that today when we had some of our discussions, and I think you get to this is just my opinion, so I'll preface my comments with that. You get to a point where I think it becomes prohibitive for some families. I mean, if you really wanted to just do a quick math problem, you could project the number of kids you think are going to participate, divide it into that 400,000, and come up with a whopper of a number.
Yeah, well, we'll never be able to do that. We'll never be able to do that. But I mean, if you added another
you could
$5,
you just do the math problem.
What is it? How many participants are there?
There's 800. There's 819.
To get rid of that 400,000 completely, or is that kind of unrealistic to not have some cost associated?
Well, I think that's part of the whole discussion. I don't think any decision's been made on that.
Right.
But that's a good point. That's I think it's a continuum of nothing versus how much can we bring back or how much can we sustain. I mean, again, it's very important that there are a lot of things in this budget process that could happen that could make some of these conversations take on a different tone. I guess that's about the most politically correct way I could say it. So there's a long way to go yet. But as she said earlier, this is an open forum to try to just, in case those solutions don't come forward, to have some meaningful conversation about how we might solve the problem.
If I may take issue with one thing that you said earlier, you said the most important thing here is the numbers. The most important thing here is not the numbers. The most important thing here are the students.
I'm not going to disagree with you. Right now in this conversation, though, the numbers are important, or we can't get to helping the students. I'm going to make it clear I don't want to cut one thing.
Okay.
I've never wanted to cut any of the things that we've had to cut over the last couple of years. Let me be clear about that. But I also have an obligation. I've taken a sworn oath with the state of Pennsylvania to come to the taxpayers in this district and this board with a balanced budget. That doesn't make my stomach feel good sometimes with the decisions I have to make. I was an athlete in high school, and I don't want to bore you all with my personal story. But my kids were athletes, and where my children went to school, this isn't a want. This is again, I don't want to boil it down to numbers, but I have to. If you don't have the money, those kids don't benefit from anything.
Right. And you're right. It is about the students. I mean, we're all here for that. I mean, we dedicate our time, for that. But it's about everything for the student. It's about their education as well, not just extracurriculars. Although extracurriculars is a key part. I mean, I have 4 kids who went through all of that, and I'm a proponent. I'm a huge proponent. But I also want to make sure they get an education. And we're having these same conversations on the program side, saying what can we save? What can we, we don't want to kill, get rid of anything there either. So this just happens to be an extracurricular discussion here, but we have the same conversation with how do we not lose any programs, for the education of these kids.
It is, but it also adds into the education of the children, and also adds into, I'm sure Claire can attest to, you just did college applications not that long ago. Mm-hmm. Your activities are extremely important. Your ability to show leadership in activities and on teams is critical.
It is.
I'll make a radical statement.
As
an educator of 36 years, I have believed my whole career and my whole life that what goes on in the extracurricular activity is the thing that makes the American education system most unique. And it's the place where kids learn leadership skills and all those other skills. When you ask employers what they want, they don't say, I want Algebra 1. They want leadership. They want cooperation. They want hard work. They want dedication. Where do our kids learn that stuff? They learn it doing this stuff. So you don't have to, I don't mean to come on so strong, but please don't misunderstand that I want to see these things go. Not by any stretch. But in a sense, we're all dealt, we have to, deal with the hand we're dealt. And we have to move on from here.
So really a big focus of this committee is not so much a budget workshop, but we're a revenue enhancement committee. So we want to also think about are there ways we can bring in revenue. I mean, we're hoping that you folks might have some ideas as well of things we could all do. I don't think there's one big thing out there that's going to get us $400,000.
Has there been discussions in the past, like, and I'll say, for example, naming rights to the football stadium?
We have a policy. 3 years ago, we passed a policy
Have we gone
to do
out
that.
and solicited?
So we can, so I'm saying that's an option.
That's absolutely an option.
Well, I actually want to take it a step further because I wrote this down and I was working on a little piece. I would like to see the stadium named and the auditorium, whereas the auditorium would be mainly for the band and for that part of it, the activities, and then the stadium could be for the football. The same person, but I don't think we should just go out there and say, oh, the person who has top dollar gets it.
Well, our policy actually deals with that whole thing. We have a naming rights policy that actually, no offense, it grew out of this committee before you were even on the board. It's there. All we have to do is implement it and find somebody willing to, if we wanted to,
Is there like a minimum, whatever it is?
It's really the policy, and I don't have it memorized, but it leaves the board a lot of discretion as to dollar amounts, and it doesn't specify that. So if some benefactor in the community, I don't even want to say a name because that would put somebody on the spot, but let's just say Corporation XYZ would decide to give us $300,000 to put their name on our stadium, we would take it. We would reevaluate it, but we would probably, at the end of the day, as long as they're not advocating, overthrowing the American government, we'd probably take their money. And the policy spells all that out.
One of the problems we really had, I've been part of this revenue committee for about 2-3 years now.
You're the charter member, I think.
Yeah, one of the problems we have is all these great ideas come out. We work the ideas, but then we have nobody who can execute on them. There's no one. So what we've tried to do is get this. What do they refer to?
The Education Foundation.
Yeah, don't they have a new name now?
The Blazer Foundation.
The Blazer Foundation. We had an education foundation, and the point of the education foundation was to go do that, to get the resources, to raise the money, to execute on the plan. And it really didn't go anywhere. So this past year, we helped kind of breathe new life into that.
But that takes
time.
time.
Now we're just getting started. So we're hoping that now we've got somebody who can execute on these ideas. But we had literally nobody. We thought about 3-4 different ideas, half a dozen ideas, and then it just went nowhere. Dr. Otto didn't have the staff to have somebody go do those things, but now
as you know,
hoping with this foundation
right.
we do. Whether or not it's going to help us this year, I don't know.
Probably, I don't think at this point that's going to be a long-term thing. They might come up with some good things, but I think they're still way off.
But they might be able to help us with naming rights.
Absolutely.
We need somebody who can go out and make phone calls.
Right.
Well, you probably ran across this already, you probably discussed it, but, like trademarking Daniel Boone.
We did have that discussion. We had a lot of hesitation in the past couple of years with that, just because of how the logo's being used today with some local businesses, and we would have to pull back on that and not try to hurt somebody in the process of doing that. But I don't think we take advantage of that. I mean, if you go into some supermarkets, you see the Pottstown logos and the other school logos all over the place, but we're not taking advantage of the Daniel Boone logo, which we should.
Well, and these are things that are part of the revenue enhancement when we're here together on a normal day. But today we're talking about this activity and how we're going to solve this. Maybe just talk about a little bit more, because we've had a lot of ideas, you're right, but nothing has really materialized from them, and that doesn't help us with what we're looking at today. So I mean, if we've talked about, I heard someone, they emailed me today about co-oping with another school district. I heard that maybe local organizations would want to take some of our teams and work with our teams, even though they're under the umbrella of Daniel Boone. So, I mean, these are ideas that people are trying to bring to us, and how that would relate to how Daniel Boone would work, I don't know. That's one thing I was reading on, just reading articles the last couple of days of other schools that have been in the same situation, and they've co-opted, they've found sponsors, they've done this, they've done that. So, that's kind of where we are. How do we save activities, or how do we keep everything in Daniel Boone and figure out how to pay for it? Yes.
There is a company out there called Market Street. What they do is they do exactly what we were discussing. They bring in advertisers, national advertisers. They sit down and work with your group. You would decide who would come in. Like they use Applebee's, Dairy Queen, days in, you would get to choose. So if you didn't like days in, you could exclude
They're
them.
similar to school media.
I believe we heard about
Well,
that.
we've been actually talking to another organization called School Media.
Okay.
And then we just recently got some more information from another company that's in the area. So that is another avenue to look at, but that's down the road to how to get more revenue in. But for this budget year, I don't think we can generate enough money to make the amount of money we need.
Have you brought them in to have presentations to see how quickly you'd be able to capitalize on the revenue?
I emailed them today, and we're still talking about contracts. So it's how the contract works, and our solicitor is looking into the contract. So yes, it is in the works, but nothing works like this fast. It's, we have to.
Uses them, Pottsgrove uses them. There's several school districts out in Lancaster County that use them. A friend of mine is part of that. One of those school districts, they have had outstanding success with them. They actually work with all the boosters programs and bring them things just for themselves from each company.
That's specifically the Market
Market
Street
It's
one?
called
Street?
Market Street. It's out of Lancaster.
Oh, so it is
Okay.
somewhat local.
It's somewhat local, and there are many organizations that do use them. Now, you can find them online. I
Okay.
know that they would come in and do a presentation, and at least then you know how quickly
Sure.
you would be able
Yeah.
to utilize that.
Absolutely.
And they look
Should
at
do
your
that.
campus and see, what can you brand?
Right.
And they meet with you 4 times a year. They meet with all the booster clubs. They talk about the revenue and what's being brought in and what can be changed and adjusted. I would absolutely think it's worth entertaining them.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Can we have set up a presentation for that, maybe at the next?
Well, let us get a hold of.
I can call them.
They were at. They did have, just not a negative, but they did have a bad experience in the Wilson School District with some advertising problems there related to the military. I don't know what that was all about, but we can certainly contact them.
Okay.
We had been in touch with them before, and then that went nowhere as well.
This isn't the same as
The school media is different.
school media,
Yeah.
okay.
School media as a whole.
Yeah, that's.
Because they had issues
whole-
with them too, and some.
Well, we were trying to figure out if
Yeah.
we could utilize both of them.
Right.
If
Well,
we were able to
that was the
use-
one that promised the school district $400,000, and they got
That was,
$6,000.
not Neshaminy.
Pensbury.
Pensbury.
Yeah.
But they're a new management now. They have
Right.
a new, so.
Yeah, we're still
But yeah,
we're still working with them.
Because we did want to find out, because one of our meetings, we talked about both of those, school media and, what was the other one? The one you just.
Market Street.
Market
Is Market
Street.
Street still at
I think
And we
Wilson?
didn't know if we
there's
could,
arrangements if you would-
yeah, we
if
didn't
you
know if we
like.
could use
I
both.
can find out.
Well,
I don't know.
we can call the different ADs to see. Usually they work with the athletic directors.
Okay. Yeah, and you need to set a committee that works with them through your school district so that you can decide. National Guard is I know runs through them. If you didn't want them here, although that would be very un-American if you didn't, but if you didn't want National Guard here, you could say, no, we don't want National Guard. We'd rather have, whatever, Applebee's.
Right. So you'll reach out? Ms. Goss, you'll reach out?
Okay,
Great, thank you.
Oh, good.
thank you. Yes.
I've heard a lot of talk about WIP, and the one thing that I've not heard mentioned is a 5-letter word that no one wants to talk about, but what about taxes?
Taxes are likely, we're early in the planning here. We intentionally started early. Typically, we don't even have these conversations until January. So we
We're a
started
month
early
ahead.
this year, but taxes are on the table as well.
I'm surprised, quite frankly, as a parent in this district, that we would be considering and talking about these athletic programs and the possibility of allowing them to go by the wayside. I mean, if these kids are not involved in programs after school, I was always raised to believe that busy children are children that are not in trouble. And if you eliminate programs, you'll find trouble.
Right.
And there will be bad things that will happen. And I just, everything you do, if you work in the corporate world or the private world, government, whatever you're involved in, expenses go up, and you have to accommodate for them. And I don't want to see taxes go up, but expenses go up. And sometimes you have to face that bad thing and say the word taxes.
With the approach we took this year, just so everyone can sort of see what it would take, as opposed to previous years, is we said, let's get the budget to zero right now, so that all the terrible things we might have to do to get it to zero. No one's wants to do all those things, or we aren't going to do all those things, but we need to see what that looks like now. We can't just keep talking about it through the months. So we immediately got it to zero and said, in order to do that, this is all the stuff that has to happen. Taxes have to get raised to the maximum. We have to cut all those things. I mean, even if we raise taxes to the maximum, we still got a tremendous shortfall.
And this is the maximum not set by Act 1 even, above and beyond Act 1.
Above and beyond with the
this is the
index.
highest by law without going to referendum, included in the proposed.
Right. So it's doing all those things. We can. I don't have the spreadsheet with you, but we've shown it in public already.
I mean, the other thing that you're missing is we also talked about, and I'll use this word, rating the fund balance again, which is what municipal governments like school districts and other municipalities have as their reserves. You never really, they tell you in Finance 101, don't use your reserves if you don't have to. We're looking at that as a possible option as well. We've done it a couple years in a row.
I mean,
and we haven't really gone down the paths of talking with all of our contracted resources to see if they can help us with on that side of it. So there's a lot of things happening for us to start reducing that deficit right now. But the important thing is that we know how terrible it would be and all the things that would have to get cut in order for us to balance that budget today. So everyone has to give a little in order to make this work. Taxes have to get raised, most likely, probably definitely. But I'm one of 9 people. I can't say that. We need help from the different unions and the other contracted resources to see if they can help us and eliminate some of those expenses so that we can help try to cut down this shortfall. There's only so many things we could do on the board. All we can do is cut things. That's all we can do. We can't really raise money. And our hands are tied on what we're allowed to touch and what we're not allowed to touch, unfortunately. So, we've got contracts that are going like this. They're multi-year contracts, and they far exceed what we're bringing in. So every year that deficit gets worse and worse and worse, and so every year we're having the same conversation to try to get it back down.
And really one of the things on the block was kindergarten and teachers, half-day kindergarten. That really starts to concern me because now we're not only going after activities, but now we're going after education. And that is why I wanted to kind of push this now to find out, is there something we can do now with activities that maybe then kindergarten can be the tax money if that has to be it. But it's not all that simple.
And it's just more than, half-day kindergarten. We're even talking about
there's a lot
busing on the table.
Mm-hmm.
And can you imagine, a lot of families, they have to go to work. They count on having their child bused, to school and back. What an enormous inconvenience it would be placed on them. But unfortunately, it's not a required thing that we have to provide, and it's something we may have to look at.
Mm-hmm.
But we didn't want to come to February and March, and then all these bad things come out, and not have everybody have a chance to be aware of it, come forward with ideas. So we agreed early on, hey, let's get ahead of the process. We knew what it was going to look like, how bad it was going to be. Let's get out in front of it and let everybody know.
So let me take it. Someone said earlier, what about the activity fee, to focus back on a potential solution? Let's just take, again, I hate to say it, a math problem. Double the activity fee. We know we're bringing in $120,000 a year approximately. So you double that. Now that's $240,000. So now that number that we talked about earlier just went down $120,000. So we're still short. Even by doubling the activity fee, we're still short. Doubling.
That's what I'm saying. Is the goal to get, that's what I'm saying, is it realistic to say that number should be zero? That's not, that's
right.
That's an unrealistic world to say, well, you got to cover all of it. Well, now if I understand the total gap was about $4 million, the whole budget?
Five.
So $400,000, so we're talking less than 10% of that whole gap.
That's correct.
Is this. Now that's pretty, that's a small portion of a $5 million gap. We're talking about $450,000. Like bigger fish to fry to get to that number than $400,000 to cover that $5 million gap.
Well,
But you got to look at other things that are getting cut as well, and I'll ask you this rhetorically because it's everyone's preference. But can you say it's okay not to cut anything on any of these activities? Yet we're cutting the buses and people have to drive their kids to school. where's the balance there? So no, we may not have to get it to zero, but there's still issues on the other side that we're trying to save over there as well.
I'm just looking at the big picture. If we're 4 or 5 million, this isn't 50% of the gap.
No,
we're trying to cut.
right.
It's a pretty small 10% of that pie we're trying to cut.
But it's the part that we can actually have control over.
Right.
We don't have control over, the contracts are what they
So
are.
if you cut sports and now instead of 5 million, you're 4.5, I mean, you didn't solve the problem.
That's correct.
Right.
That is a correct statement.
I mean, you didn't. So that's all I'm saying.
There's many other meetings just like this one.
Yeah,
to
so
solve
you
those other
can
ones.
control, but it didn't solve the problem.
Yeah.
No.
Right.
Let me say this to you, and I don't recall seeing you at our budget meeting, but when we presented that balanced budget, we tried to do it based on all of the things we know we can and can't do, things that are required and aren't required, but we showed about 2.6 in cuts and 2.4 in new revenue. So it was balanced, revenue and expenditure. So the 2.6 is cuts, 2.4 represented about $1.2 million in taxes, because that's about the most revenue we could raise by saddling the taxpayers with that. That's a big chunk. And then also using about $1.2 million of fund balance, which is almost like financial suicide. So that's the revenue side. And then on the other side, we outlined what the $2.6 million of cuts were, sports being, as you just alluded to, a small part of that, percentage-wise, relatively speaking. There's about 40 teachers and staff that would be affected by this cut as well. So it's an enormous problem. And again, I don't want to turn this into a budget workshop.
Right.
We really are trying to just focus on this part because, frankly, it may be savable, and there may be some things that happen between now and June. Maybe, I hate to say it, maybe Governor Corbett and the state Congress and Senate is going to throw some extra money into the basic education funding that we get. Maybe they're going to find a solution to all the money that's going out the door for cyber charter schools. That a lot of us in the education world are saying, wait a minute, they're taking away a lot of money, and they're actually saying that there may be some impropriety. And I don't want to say that they're cheating, but that there's kind of some double dipping going on with that money. Maybe that money will get resolved and come back to us. There are a lot of things that could happen between now and June.
I think that's like $800,000.
That's $800,000 of our budget goes out for students who are attending cyber charters. So when you hear and you write your letters to your congressman and they wrote into the law, you're all paying for those kids to go to cyber charter schools. That's not free. It comes out of the subsidy that comes to this school district. And it goes, my business manager, we look at the reports every month, and those checks go right out the door. We can't stop them. We're not allowed to stop them. If 10 more kids tomorrow come and say, you know what, Mr. Principal, Mr. Superintendent, we're out of here, we're going to this cyber charter, they're gone. We can't stop them. But what's happening is they're finding that a lot of these cyber charters are overcharging for their services, and the state's not doing anything about it. That's a political and a legislative issue. There's not one thing anybody in this room can do about that. But the people that you vote into office need to take a look at that. And they need to be told to take a look at it, or you need to threaten to get them out. We can't do that. And that's a big, big issue. I mean, could you imagine if suddenly they said, you know what, we could give you $400,000 of your subsidy back. $400,000? We might say, you know what, the sports question's solved. Everybody can go home.
How many of our students participate in cyber? I know this isn't what we're supposed to be talking about tonight. I don't know. It's in the 100 range.
Yeah. Okay.
I think you threw out, if I remember, like an $8,000 range. Is this all back of the napkin numbers? It's like
well, no. If they're a regular education student, about $9,000 goes out the door. If they're a special education student, double that.
Okay.
Now, one last thing on the budget.
No, go ahead.
Back on it.
I just want to answer her question because she keeps raising her hand.
I didn't mean to interrupt. I just think there's some important. You've come, and I think part of what we want to do is make sure we educate you because we know you'll go talk to people.
And the difference this would be from your company that your business or the company you work for, the difference you have there that we have is, in my business, if I was faced with some of these financial difficulties, I would say, you know what, I don't want to lose people, and I don't want to diminish my services or anything like that. So one way to keep everyone going is, I'm not giving out raises, I'm not giving out bonuses, I'm not giving out any of that. This way I don't have to lay people off or fire them, and maybe we can keep things going. That is not an option for us. So we're looking at strictly how we can run things more efficiently and run things better. We're hoping that our partners come to us, who we have contracts with, and offer some solution up. And, you know, we're very hopeful that that's going to happen as this discussion continues. But that's out of our thinking. We can't do that. So we're faced with trying to figure out, short of not having that, we're short of figuring out how can we run things for less money, with, you know, or if there's something we have to cut, let's cut it. But all that could go away because someone could come to us and say, you know what, we can take $1 million off of that budget right now just by doing something.
Now, is there, and I know we just talked about it briefly, this $450,000 gap. Has there been discussions, what is an acceptable gap? Is it 250,000? Is it 200,000?
I don't think we know that yet.
Because I think whatever that gap is, the stuff you can't measure, that what those activities give the kids, that you can't put a dollar sign to, far exceeds 400,000, 200, whatever it is. It far exceeds that. Right. At the end of the day, that $400,000, I don't know, just my opinion, isn't that's not what it values to those kids. There's nothing else you can make a comparison.
We have to balance the budget. So it's not like we can say, well, I'm sorry, we're a little shy this year. We're not really going to balance it. We can't do that. We have to.
I can tell you this. I have in my mind.
Balance it somewhere else. I'm not saying don't balance it. I want it balanced.
Yeah.
I have in my mind a reverse priority of returning things to the budget. That we, because as I represented to you, we have $2.6 million of cuts on the table. And this is just one of them. So there's a lot of pain that's going to be felt regardless. My guess is by the end of this budget, some things that happened here last year aren't going to happen again next year. That's just the reality. But if we have the ability, the first two things, and I'll say it publicly that I would like to see returned to the budget, are kindergarten and sports. In that order. I'll say that in that order.
Does that include other
activities?
Or
Just
everything. In other words, first the kindergarten program, and then the entire extracurricular program. Those would be the first two things that I would say, once we found the money, they need to be the first off the chopping block. That's just me. The board, again, I advise the board, but that's just me.
Right, but what I'm saying is, and I agree with you, but if some of these ideas of working with Michelle, and I've talked to her a lot, if so to speak, sports finds a way to cut their nut down,
that will help.
Do they bump ahead of kindergarten who doesn't have a chance? That's what I'm saying. Like you said, your priority is kindergarten.
I don't even know if that is. Conceptually, I don't even look at it that way because it's in such everything's intertwined because all the money is kind of together. But if we suddenly, for example, let me just say it this way, hypothetically, we find out from Governor Corbett that he's raised our basic education funding rate another $1 million over what it was last year. I'd say, well, I would ask the board, let's have a discussion, but I would recommend that kindergarten's off the block, and now so is athletics and extracurriculars. The board may or may not accept my recommendation. That's their discretion. I work at the behest of the board. But that would be my recommendation as the, quote, the CEO of the school district. So, but if I don't get that $1 million, I can't have that conversation because it's meaningless. It's giving people false hope. So until I find ways to fill that gap, having that conversation is premature. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's kind of the way I look at it.
Okay, I'm going to have her answer her question.
Extracurriculars that were cut, it's not just extracurricular like things after school. It was things that happened during school that they don't have to fund, like music in elementary school. That's gone. That's teachers, and there'll be no music in the elementary schools.
There'll be music, but not the band pull-out program. All we will do is the minimum requirement under our Chapter 4 curriculum regulations. We right now, like most school districts, have been able to afford to have kids basically do a pull-out band program because everybody believes in music. It's not about not believing in it. Everybody believed that was good for kids. And if you look around the county, around the country, around the state, a lot of schools have elementary band pull-out programs. Maybe some of you have had kids go through it. But that's on the chopping block too. And I'm sure the music boosters in that group is well aware that that's on the chopping block. And that would be another thing we would like to see come back. So it becomes that.
Really quickly, included, you mentioned the elementary music, and you mentioned the elementary band pull-out program specifically. I know there's a choral program, or at least there was, there's a choral component. Does that run through general music, or is that considered an extracurricular?
What was it, the choral?
That's extracurricular, isn't it?
There's
I'm
the
not sure. I'm talking about elementary.
choral's senior course and
No,
choral.
there's an extracurricular component, but that's all part of that music part that would get lost. That's that extra stuff.
Because I remember that was part of the general music program. So I'm trying to figure out, because I know elementary band is important too, and I'm just trying to figure out, is choir, where does that, because that's not,
It's everything.
That's mixed in with that.
that's mixed in with the general music or mixed in with the pull-out program? Is choir a pull-out program?
No, choir's pull-out program as well.
It is, okay.
'Cause it's in with the activities.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Basically, thank you.
Yeah.
To cut to the chase.
Okay, let's let her speak because
Okay,
she.
so we talked about getting advertisers for our sports teams. What about for the extra activities? What about getting J Lanes to donate $2,000 to the bowling team and putting J Lanes on their shirts? It's a whole lot easier to make 5 bowling shirts.
It's an excellent
Instead
idea.
of-
I mean, we can do all those things.
Instead of having the whole football team redone with young Yaboon so-and-so construction. I mean, if you do the students know? I mean, I understand that some of the student body knows, but if you brought it to the students and said, hey, these programs are going to end, we need to find sponsors for each of your programs. Can you help us? And ask the students to go out there and knock on the doors of the companies in the area and maybe try and get the money.
Sure.
We had Mr. Seminaro actually tried to pilot, offered a suggestion. You might want to talk about your adopted program.
Well, my other question
Never happened,
was,
so.
look at colleges to advertise in high school.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
Colleges to advertise in the high school. Our students are going to go to college.
Yeah, they're all great ideas. It's and we've had these discussions before, but then we walk away and say, well, who's doing that?
Who
you doing
is?
that? Or who's doing that? And no one ever does anything with them. So we always had a problem with execution. They're phenomenal. They're great ideas.
I mean, I remember having college reps come into the school and want to talk to us and figure it out. Why don't when the college rep comes in and said, hey, you want to talk to our students? Great. Here's a form we'd like you to advertise in our school too for X amount of dollars. And just turn it right back around at them. I've had people that want to come and talk to my mom's club group, and I said, hey, we don't really want you to come and talk, but you want to advertise in our newsletter for $50? Sure, they'll do that.
I just write down comments here. They're great ideas. I just hope these things in the past, they always get lost in getting done.
Tell me not to raise your hand.
I'm sorry.
Good.
You don't have to raise your hand. Just identify yourself and start
Seems to
talking.
be working pretty well. Have you guys ever, what about contracting it out? I mean, like I work for a company and they do a lot of subcontracting.
You mean outsourcing it?
Yes, and outsourcing it. Why not just outsource it? As a matter of fact, there was a discussion about somebody wanting to lease, at the school board meeting, lease the fields.
Mm-hmm.
If you give a company the rights to the student body as an entire, as the only supported athletic program, I wonder if it almost could be an equal thing where that value to them for that population would be of value. Maybe it could be more of a make money thing than necessarily a cost, or it could defer almost all the costs, so it's their cost. Is there any energy around contracting it out?
I'm personally not aware of anybody that does that, so that would be an idea worth exploring. Quite frankly, it's what we do with our food service. It's the exact same model we have for food service.
Like, using that example, maybe we could, I'm just trying to figure out if I understand correctly. Instead of J Lanes just donating to put their name on the uniform, pretty much say, J Lanes, you could run our bowling team.
Yes.
Like that. Or it cost $4,000.
Well, you need to understand,
Is that what, do I understand correctly?
outsourcing still results in somebody having to pay for the service somewhere along the way.
It would be the person doing the...
Just like when you outsource your cafeteria service, the kids still have to pay for the lunch, so they're not getting it for free.
Right. They're going to charge the student body.
Right, exactly.
It'd be up to them, though.
The cost would be set by them then. But you have to be careful in terms of athletics. There are some issues if we're going to continue to be associated with the PIAA, because that's really why kids do it. And the activities obviously don't have a PIAA connection. That's more of an athletic conversation. So you have to be, and then also Title IX issues in terms of equity and gender participation as well are all questions that don't go away if you have a sports program. So the district can never totally lose its name being attached to the program, regardless of who pays for it.
Now,
That's really a legal issue more than it is a money and program issue.
I'm actually going to get back to the activities fee. if we were to leave everything the same, like the way the school has been running it, what would you think the maximum activities fee would be that would be acceptable?
Well, you have to turn that around. That's a different question. How much a year do we pay for child activities?
Well, the cap's $500.
The cap is $5.
No, not the school. Me as an individual.
Oh, I know what you're saying.
To do all types of activities in a year, that well exceeds $1,000, $2,000, somewhere in that range. Per
Yeah,
kid.
just because an activity costs you $150 for the first one, $75 for the second one, and clubs are $50. If I got that right.
That's correct.
But each one of those things, like in an organization, they have.
I know what he's talking about.
Uniform may be $150. This trip may be
Absolutely.
$200. The shoes.
The soft costs, they're not so soft.
I mean, I had 2 girls in the same year go through this. I was writing a really big check twice a year.
Right.
So I mean, that number is easily a couple of $1,000. When you add in, now you're paying the fuel to get him to and from, and I'm not driving him. If I compared it to my youth sports and how much money I put out, I pay $150 for my kid to play football, and then 4 Saturdays I'm driving to Conrad Weiser, I'm driving here. All that's cost for my kid to do activity. So that's more than $150. It's not even close. When you add in all of those costs, if you look at it. So as far as, I think maybe the number scares you when you say, what could that number be? I mean, I think it's easily a couple $100, $250 per sport, and no discount after the second or third. And then you're still saying if you played 3, that's $750. That's cheaper than any youth. If I did 3 sports and all the costs I spent with those youth programs, we'd far exceed that number.
Right. One of the one.
I spend a lot more than that.
I spend
I'm just saying, no, I'm not saying to the district.
Well,
I
let's see.
wouldn't want to pay more than $150 in an activity fee to the district.
No.
I already put out another.
And this is the point I was trying to make, right? Sports is a giant pyramid, right? At the very bottom, you got my kids, the 6-year-olds, the 8-year-olds, and as you start going up the pyramid, you have less and less kids because they get more talented or focused or.
That's more competitive.
And so on and so forth. How it works in some sports like soccer, the rec teams, the little kids, pay for all the travel teams' costs for the most part. So if we want to solve this problem, we need to look at sports from a holistic standpoint. If we get them all under one umbrella, we have the little ones pretty much pay for the big ones, right? There's a lot of money being spent out there. A lot of money. Gymnastics, karate, football, the whole 9 yards.
Yep, everything.
There's millions of dollars that we spend. How many kids are in a school district, and how much do they spend on sports? More than the budget's cutting. How much? 4 million? Or how much are we? 700,000? You're talking
Just about 700.
I'm pretty sure we'll probably spend a tenfold in that in sports. If we focus on consolidating our sports from the bottom all the way up, the little ones, there's 10,000 of them playing sports. Probably about 10,000.
No, we get your point.
How many little ones play sports right now? Right? There's thousands and thousands.
Well, these fields are full of people on the weekends when I'm around
Full
here.
of people on them, right? They're filled with the people. They can help fund the schools and the school districts and the high schools, right? And this is the problem, right? And please don't take this as an insult. I'm a very brash, direct person. These guys will tell you, right? You got to get away from the board mentality and start driving it to people to make decisions, right? I was a consultant for 17 years. They paid me money to come in, make decisions, and move. Analysis paralysis kills me. I mean, it drives me nuts. These guys know I make rash decisions, but they're usually pretty much right. But if we look at it from a holistic standpoint, trying to pull all these clubs into one organization, and they can fund each other. When we outsource or sell the rights to our baseball fields over here to profit organizations, we should be getting that money. Our football field out here, we should be getting that money up to high school. We should be renting that out and getting that money. Now, Jeff here, he knows how to make money and do fundraising. I mean, there's a lot of people in these organizations that know how to drive and make money for these organizations. So if we can look at it from a holistic standpoint and try to get these clubs together, we all work together as a group, we might be for a for-profit organization. Just a thought. The fantasy land thought, but you never know.
Starts with a thought.
Starts with a thought, yeah, exactly. So, I mean, there's a lot of, I know I spend I don't know how much you guys spend a year, but I know it's like $2 to $3 grand a year on
That's
sports
what I
for
was saying
kids.
with the activity fee. When you're looking at it just as a fee, and you guys handle all the costs. Personally, as a kid, I have 2 kids that just got done playing youth sports. And 2 kids played baseball, that's $250. 2 kids played football, that was another $3. They wrestled, that was another $150, and that didn't include me driving there, driving back, and doing all those other things. That's why I think, to me anyway, and I can't speak for everybody else, to me, that activity fee is cheaper than I'm paying now. I'm getting off cheaper by moving on to school sports than paying all the youth sports I'm paying. I'm making, I think that number could be higher. I'm sure that's not for everybody. I'm
Right.
just saying that,
Now,
to me,
what-
I would pay more for it to have.
What happens, I'm just throwing this out here, what happens if there's a family that, quite frankly, they can barely afford what they have for getting their school, the kid to school, getting their kid clothes, and they can scrape that $150 together to have them play an activity, and they have to choose what activity, because they can only afford maybe one a year. We've seen that where, families had to choose. They participated in a whole bunch of things, and then when we instituted the $150 activity fee and $75 after that, we saw a lot less participation. It wasn't, we tried to, the board looked at it, not on they looked at it on a static scale, and what happened was, the numbers of students actually participated dropped off.
And what happened in football is those kids just played. Where the money come from, doesn't matter. They just played. Everybody else paid for it.
When you reduce the cost of lunches, you can probably reduce the cost of that activity fee.
You could make it based on income. You could easily say, okay, if your income earning is here, then this is what your activity.
Well, I think
Yeah, and I
Well,
think
we
can
do that now.
We do that today.
And
Yes.
there's private scholarships, organizations can put together private scholarships. If you meet your reduced lunch criteria, and Michelle comes to one of us, another organization and says, look, I have this family, this is the documentation that they have, can you pick up that extra cost? And I'm sure that could be arranged.
I know a lot of educational foundations that are up and running actually do that. They provide scholarships for needy kids.
Meaning increasing our activities fees is a lot cheaper than watching the value of our houses go down. Because who would move into a district? Would any of you have moved into this district with no sports or music? Ever? Okay. Yeah, I don't think there are many. I can't imagine being able to sell your house, moving into a district with no sports or music.
Without taking an actual
higher taxes.
person-by-person poll, I
Yeah.
think the conventional wisdom is that most people want those kind of activities.
You have children, yeah.
Right.
That conversation we had before, and where that led was, we came up with this concept of what we called at the time adopt a program, where it gave people like yourself who thought it was, they were willing to put out the extra money because their children or their child participates, to be able to not so much raise the fees on everybody all the way around, but to donate into that program, to say, listen, I can make a $250 donation, but I want that to go specifically to this program. I don't want it to go into the big pot to help balance the budget. If you accept this money, it goes into this program, and if for some reason that program goes away, I get that money back. And we started to develop that idea called Adopt a Program, where you can be like an a la carte menu, and you can pick exactly the things you want to donate that money to go toward. And frankly, we haven't had any.
We had one. The Optimist Club.
We
The
had
Optimist Club paid for
Which is
themselves
great.
one year.
Thank you to the Optimist Club for helping.
Well, that was 2 years ago, I think.
Is that a renewal thing? Do they?
No, we just picked up the cost.
Oh,
Well, but the activity fee then that kicked in.
Shane?
You also have to consider, there's sports that aren't being funded at all by the school district. So if you up the activity fee, that's great, but the sports that are already forking out $600, $700 for their sport, they also are paying an activity fee.
No, they're not. If you're playing lacrosse, which is under another umbrella, they do not pay an activity fee. They pay a fee to play lacrosse, and they fundraise to play lacrosse. But they don't pay anything to the
Correct.
district.
And then there's also some of the, some sports get an all-inclusive package. And take band, for instance. Marching band and indoor
I spent $1,200 last year. And it wasn't for me driving and going to, it was a cost that the school district doesn't cover. And I brought that up to the school district, and they said, well, you know, those things the board never covered, so we're not going to cover them now. I said, well, then can you at least give me a break on the activity fee, lower it or something? And no, so it cost me $1,200 to participate in music, and that's not including all the music lessons, all the other, you know, just like baseball, you go to your camps and stuff like that. So it does get expensive.
It's true.
And you know, there are sports that football, you know, they get an all-inclusive package. Some sports, they have to find their own transportation and pay fees for this, and so.
Well, part of that, I mean, I'm sure it's not like anything going to college, you know, football is that also brings in the most money too. So you can go to any college or university now and have the same discussions on the budget. Well, football drives everything because that's the biggest money maker.
It's ours. It's ours as well.
You can go anywhere. It's the biggest one because you get the biggest gain. So, of course, that's going to be the driver. And they probably would get, rightfully so, most of the stuff. They break most of the money in without them.
But it still doesn't cover their expenses. No. They're still $30,000, $40,000. They cost the district.
Yeah,
even
that's
if you
about
gave
right.
the
It's about
whole
$40,000 short. The money that comes in from football.
Right, it never covers it all.
$40,000 short.
He's right. It never covers it all.
Right, yeah.
So you have bowling that costs the school district $4,000.
Together, bowling, boys and girls, is almost $6,000.
$6,000. And football costing $40,000 after you give, because there are people also come to hear the band. So just
correct.
The whole $40,000 to the football, it still costs almost 10 times more.
Now, football, actually, I have the figures here. In football, if you put middle school and high school together, it is $51,000. But then they bring in over $25,000 in gate. So it's $26,000 that they basically it costs us. It doesn't cost us that much to run that program. There are other sports that are almost as expensive. It just depends. But when you put it all in a nutshell, you have to look at everything that we offer. And I
think the last thing we want to do is pit one sport against another. They're all important.
I mean,
everybody has their niche.
Activity, right.
I think we all have the same objective here. We want to save everything. You know, it's not, you know, us trying to cut something and everyone coming in trying to tell us not to. We're trying to work together, all of us, to save everything.
My thought was if we up the activity fee, and then as time goes on where we can implement some of these ideas about getting advertising, about getting maybe the stadium name, the auditorium name, and we're able to then slowly, if it would be great to lower and kind of even out that activity fee later. You know, so it might be high for a year or two, but then it might go down. Like, is that something that might be more workable maybe? Or, I don't know, I'm just trying to figure out, because I think right now we're in a crunch. So we might need to up that activity fee. And it might be substantial. But then in time, we might be able to bring in more revenue and kind of balance that out later. Yes?
If you did that, say you did that, would you be able to put some type of a date for people? Because we all know that once things go up, they usually don't come down.
Mm-hmm.
So if you said, okay, we're in a crunch for the next 2 years, so for 2 years, it's going to be this, and then it's going to come back down to, you know, where it is now.
I think we would need to have a phase out.
We have the highest activity fee.
Pardon me?
We have the highest activity fee now. We do not have the highest paid coaches right now. Am I correct? In our district? But we do have.
You mean across the county?
Across the county.
I actually wouldn't know that. Goose, do you
I'm
know?
not sure that we don't have the highest paid coaches.
I don't know.
I've never seen a comparison of that.
So is there a way to do that? Is there a way to make that condition?
I don't think it would be prudent to give a set date without knowing what the budgetary environment would be in the coming years, but I do think that we need to have a phase-out period where we could go back then. We would need to have my point is we need to know to review it. So it wouldn't just be a permanent source of income, but we know to go back and look at it.
One of the things that we discussed from, I guess, an accounting standpoint today was looking at starting an athletic fund very much the same way we have a cafeteria fund, and trying to use that as a source to begin to put money into that, almost like a capital reserve to say, this is only athletic money. We don't want it mixed in with the rest of the money. So that's a concept that's new, and we'd have to really get started on it. But it's a possible avenue for setting aside money so that every year we don't have to worry. We can look every year and say, well, our athletic reserve now, you kind of build like an athletic reserve fund so that you know every year going forward, the district has to, then the district can, we can build our budget predicated on what's sitting over here in this pot of money. But we don't have anything like that yet, because the conversation is kind of driving us to find different solutions now.
And will we also do that with the activities?
I think when we talk in these terms, I don't want to break it out between sports, music, and extracurricular. It should be all or none.
Right.
The one big thing, because you're going to have.
Well, when I say athletic fund, I mean extracurricular fund.
Sports and athletics continually gets thrown out, and I just want to make sure everyone understands. We're looking at it from the whole thing, not just one piece of it.
How would you allocate? Obviously, if it's a general fund, how are you going to allocate a program, say, football is in danger at a higher cost versus sport B? You're going to take the larger sum of money for that program, and at the end, maybe there's zero there, and then that program hasn't canceled.
No, that's not what I was suggesting.
So I don't know how you would allocate funds for all the programs.
Can you repeat that?
As far as, say, if you had $100,000 in that sports fund, well, $50,000 you need it for football. Football's in danger of being canceled. So we take that $50,000, implement that in that program, and then be at zero.
More what I was thinking was if we would start to get, I was thinking if you would start to either get donations or you get
revenue,
benefactors or revenue or something, that revenue is designated to go into the big pot for sports and athletics and extracurriculars. That's it. That's all that can be touched to be used.
Adopt a program like we talked 2 years ago. I mean, obviously, I was one of the activities committee that tried to implement it, and we had a big discussion in. Obviously, we are the largest. And obviously, the schools came behind us. We're a step ahead, I think, by a couple of years. The problem is, unfortunately, some students, sports are everything. And that might be the success of their life for a college scholarship. And at that point, if they don't have that can be failure for them. And probably though, like any parent with kids in the district, if you don't have that program, how much are you willing to spend to go to another district? So if you're going to do that, I'd rather see it go in to the district here and keep that program.
Yeah, but the problem with that is nobody wants to donate and fundraise for the school district, right? If you have a private organization,
much of a program.
But if you have a private organization, you got people like Brian who gets $2,000 for his company, baseball. I get $500 from my company, right? They're going to go out and they're going to fight for that private organization. We look at the school district. To be honest, I don't want to give you $10,000. What are you going to do? You're going to piss it away. I'm sorry. I didn't say that.
It's only on tape.
but
we didn't identify you.
Fundamentally, you give money to a board. It's just going to be thrown away in everybody's saying a $1.4 million football field and stuff like that. That's how that mentality goes. Schools are not going to be able to do that type of fundraising. I mean, don't get me wrong. You might be able to get sponsors and things like that and people to buy stadiums, but it's going to be very difficult for schools to do that kind of fundraising. What they do in like Texas and other places, they have like football booster clubs, and they kind of run the program. So. Well, I'm not saying that we got to make a switch. I'm saying that you got to get that fundamental family grassroots ownership of programs to drive people to give money.
That's just your sport or your activity.
I'm just talking in general. That's what I'm saying, the whole thing.
And the fundraising comes from the corporate sponsorship. That is the fundraising. And the teams are already doing their fundraising as our music booster. So
maybe, but I think to get back, maybe if, for example, we were able to find ways to creatively fund, say, the bigger ticket items, then the board wouldn't have to worry about budgeting as much and could still take care of the music and the other activities. You know what I'm saying? It could be a cooperative effort and a group effort the district's never going to totally, I don't think, lose some need to budget some money for this stuff. But there's a question of, because some of you guys are saying it, how much of that is the question.
I think it comes down how much you value the program. So it's no different than I
Michelle has an idea she wants to share about salaries.
The music program,
Okay.
the marching band down there, very large. We're talking several hundred students in the band, and they're paying up to $1,000 a student. You're talking quite the production. So it all comes down to what you value. I mean, education study first, but I think all that comes together. Hey, fundraising goes hand in hand with cost reduction as well, because maybe some of our contracted partners would be willing to reduce their costs by the amount it would take to run these programs. And we're done. We're good.
For this year.
For this year.
But
For this year.
if we're sitting here talking about how to balance the budget this year, then you can take that right off the table.
Yeah. So, Michelle, you're going to...
I was just going to share an idea that in talking with an athletic director from Greenwood County, down south, their district, their school board.
This is in North Carolina, she said.
They pay the salaries of all the coaches, extracurricular stipends, and all that. That is all they pay for out of their general fund budget. And how they make everything work is because they get everything back into, like Dr. Otto was saying, an athletic fund, like the CAF works. They get all their gate receipts. They get all their, from every sport that they charge for, they get all that to cover the transportation costs, the officials, the security that you need. And they have an outstanding, like they go to states, they do things like that in all their sports, not just a few, but they're credible and it works. And to me, if it works for them and we have people that are willing to jump on board with that and fund the rest of it, if the district could cover the salaries.
So just going to the games is really a fundraiser in and of itself, because all the money
Right.
goes back.
Because that
Concessions, all that stuff.
that probably would cut the number that you're talking about almost in half. Just
Because I know that looking at the breakdown, the vast majority of the money that the district pays goes into the salary and the stipend, the Social Security. Not very much, not very much goes to equipment, stuff like that. At least
that has already been pretty much cut down bone dry last year.
I mean, I know with my kids in the sports, parents pay for the uniforms, the warm-ups, the spikes.
I think the youth
shoes,
sports programs
everything.
do that already, too.
Yeah.
I mean, from my recollection, my kids played soccer, too. I was always writing a check. I guess that hasn't changed.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if anyone has any comments or anything else that we need to add to this discussion, if not, we can finish up. Yes?
I guess the only thing I have to say is, at some point, the board's going to have to sit down, I imagine, and figure out, and Dr. Earl alluded to this earlier, what are the priorities of things that have to go back, that should go back in, that are now cut? And I guess my question is, you spent a little time on tonight talking about those other things. But is the Revenue Enhancement Committee or the board going to have that discussion somewhat soon? You understand what I'm saying?
Everything, Mr. Schatt, not just, you're talking about not just extracurricular, you're talking about everything?
That's correct.
Yeah. The focus of tonight's meeting, Ms. Hamill wanted to focus on extracurricular specifically,
Okay.
so we can have this discussion, and we invited folks who have children participating to help. But yes, in our budget workshops and in our budget meetings, we're extending beyond just the extracurriculars.
So, but there won't be a revenue enhancement meeting concern. I'll just lay it out. My priority is to save kindergarten and the encore, because I don't think you should cut 35% in art, music, phys ed, library, and technology in the elementary. I just don't believe that. And that's where my priorities are. Do I think the other things are very important? Yes. Would it hurt the district if those things weren't here? Yes. But it already hurt the district, in my opinion, by cutting full-day kindergarten down to half-day kindergarten. Because not every child needed full-day kindergarten. But some do. And those that don't get it in this district will never, some of them, will never catch up.
Yeah,
And if you take away kindergarten, altogether, there's many, many, many more that will never catch up. So all I'm saying is I don't know when it's scheduled, but I'd like to hear from board members where you like on the priority.
I'll speak to that right now. For me, one of 9, the first thing that goes back before any extracurricular activity, any music, sport, or club, kindergarten's got to go back. That, for me, number 1, I would never vote for a budget that didn't have, at least a half-day kindergarten. That's my position.
And I would agree 100% with him. My daughter missed she only had half-day kindergarten last year. It's crazy. That's insane. You take away kindergarten, you take away, these other things, those are priority. Of course, education is priority. Sports are, I think, almost as high of a priority. But going back to half-day kindergarten, there was a group that got together, and how much money did they raise to try to get close to bringing full-day kindergarten back? And they got close to what, 70, 80 grand? And possible money to help fund the supplement to 400 grand to get half-day kindergarten to full day again. I don't know, were you guys familiar with that at all?
Absolutely, totally.
How much money did they come back with?
I don't think it was that high.
I don't remember.
It was like $66,000.
Yeah.
Is what they came back and they needed, what, 400 grand or something?
We needed 400.
They didn't have a lot of time. If they had more time, I bet you they would have done it.
In 1 month time.
I know.
Yeah.
They didn't have a lot of time.
So that's going back to the philosophy that I was saying. We got to get all of our sports into a giant pyramid to feed these programs, and then we don't have to miss half-day kindergarten. We don't have to get rid of technology in the afternoon. We don't have to worry about the band. We not privatize it, but somewhat that people who want to drive it and be successful in driving it help drive it. It's a simple concept. Will it work? It could.
I would just urge all of you, as I know you're dedicated to this, and I'm being dead serious about this. You need to get a hold of the political leaders that are making the decisions that we can't control. When I tell you that money goes out the door, I can show you. It's not a right to know thing. I can show you with the names missing, the almost $1 million that goes out of this school district on an annual basis now for charter school payments. It's going out the door. It's probably the most silent travesty in this state right now. I'm not anti-school choice. Don't get me wrong. Because that's a whole political football. But you hear the old cliche, unfunded mandate. We still have 3,800 kids here. So we lost maybe 100 of them that go out to these charter schools. We still have all the same costs.
So there are a few things that members of the public can do to help. They could contact state legislators, contact the governor, and I would add contact members of our collective bargaining units. That's my opinion, because I believe that, as Mr. Sermonero alluded to earlier, there is potential revenue there as well to help protect some of these programs. So there are contacting these political leaders can have an impact.
My next meeting is tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock at the BCIU. All of the Berks County superintendents, we meet once a month. And we invite all of the local legislators that represent our areas to have a breakfast with us once a year. Frankly, they never like to hear what we have to say, but we say it anyway. Doesn't really change much because they think we're just, we have a vested interest in trying to save our jobs or whatever it is they think. But they listen to you. They really, I hope they do. Maybe they don't. I don't know.
Okay.
Mr. Schatt, real quick, getting back to your question, I don't set the agenda for our meetings, but our next meeting, Committee of the Whole, is January 14th, and I'm confident we're going to talk about those topics at that meeting. And at that meeting, we'll probably set the agenda for our next set of budget workshop meetings. And then
We're talking internally. We've already recommended from my office, recommended to the board that it's time to get the budget workshop calendar set up as well. So we'll be having a lot of meetings.
When you have to put a budget out 30 days before June 30th, when you vote on something in May, correct? You vote on something.
On the fourth Monday of May, we will post a budget for final approval. That is correct.
At that point,
Or I think it's the third Monday because Memorial Day is the fourth, so it's actually the third.
at that point, you have an estimate as to how much you will spend in the current fiscal year in the budget. Is that correct? There'll be a dollar amount.
A projection, yes.
That's right. Over the last 4 years, let's say last 4 years, has that estimate of expenditures, or how much money you thought you would have you ended up June 30th with more or less?
Always, since I've been here, it's always been a surplus.
That's correct. And approximately how much?
I can't quote you the figures. That's what feeds into your fund balance.
I understand.
And
that's why
one of the things that
that's why I'm always willing to vote to use more fund balance, because lots of times it ends up not getting used. So that's why
that's
last
been a
year,
function.
year before that, I would always push.
But that's a good point.
To use more fund balance,
and I want to
because of that reason.
I want to say this because it's an important point. Every year, additionally, we have frozen our budget and only made sure all we're doing is paying our bills. We're not doing any. We're not doing any beyond the pale spending. So the reason that there's generally money left over is because of the efforts of the administration to economize and save that money for what we're doing. But I know, but when people hear, oh, well, you threw a surplus, well, no, wait a minute. That's, well, just before anyone says it, I'm preempting that comment.
But I'm questioning, what I'm questioning is the number that you get in May. After you've had your freeze for the year, and then what you end up in June just a month later. That number in the last 4 years has even been higher than what you thought it would be. Is that correct or not?
That I can't verify that. I can verify it at another time. I can tell you this, though. The money that you represent then, there are a lot of unencumbered costs that come back to us throughout the summer, and a lot of them for special education placements that are quite expensive because the billing lags. You have to remember the number that you see is a number in time. It's not a final number. The fully audited number doesn't come through till October when we do the audit report, because we still actually do run expenses for the previous year through the entire summer. So to take that number and bandy it about in the public is dangerous in June.
Well, it's because we don't know what those expenses
exactly.
It's not that we just haven't incurred them, it's that we don't know. Like you said, they have.
There are a lot of, we can't control the way people send us the money that they owe us or that we owe them all the time. It's a number on a piece of paper in June. So before you take that number up there and start playing with it, just be careful to put it in the proper context.
Yeah, and in this meeting, really, one of the biggest reasons we brought this up now, even though it's only one issue, we didn't want to wait till March, April, May, and then try to figure out how to make this stay. It might be too late. We might be able to renegotiate things, but it's a matter of we want to start looking at it now, and then we can plan for the future.
Remember?
So that's all this meeting really was designed to do.
The folks who attend meetings regularly, Mr. Shad, you remember when we made the decision on cutting kindergarten to half day, how far we were along in the process. It was almost time to submit that budget. Now we're talking about it in December, so we've got time to react. That organization we talked about before, they only had a month to raise the money.
Right.
Now we're sitting in December and we're talking about the potential of losing that, so we have time to react. So we appreciate everyone's,
I do want to say something about
yes.
at that time, the process with the state as well, if you recall, the state was very, very hesitant to even respond to our request because at that time you needed state permission to do that. That has been removed. We no longer need the state's permission to reduce anything. So back 2 years ago, we were waiting months on end for the state to respond to us for a request that had been made months prior. So just as you have these conversations, it's important to deal with the historical context and honestly to deal with the facts. It's very important.
I know you mentioned that recently too. That somebody asked that at a board meeting.
Right.
You no longer have to have it approved. Here's my question. I'm not suggesting you do this, but if you got rid of phys ed at the elementary,
Well, we actually can't get rid of it.
that's what I'm asking you.
You can't get rid of it. You can reduce it.
You can reduce it.
Because Chapter 4 regulations, and I would welcome anyone that wants to be bored, but I can show you them because
Just
I
says
actually
you have to have them. But
there's language in the forever we have been exceeding what the state requires us to do. I need to say that because times were good and the money was there. But we have always far exceeded what the state has required. And the state requires, if you read the language, it's just a music experience. That's what the words say. I'll show them to anybody that wants to look at them. I'm not making this up. I have been, in my existence, I have been a school law professor. I know this stuff. I'm not trying to brag. I'm just telling you, it's there. And when you look at, a lot of people don't know that all you have to offer in the school code is 4 years of one foreign language and 2 of another. And that's it. That's the minimum. I was a foreign language teacher for 12 years. That's how I started my career. I sat here and we cut foreign language out of the program for a while. Thank you, Mr. Sherman.
Hey, I'm sorry.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So everybody has a personal story and a personal connection to a lot of this, myself included. But I just want you to be aware that, no, you can't cut. To answer your question, to come full circle, you can't cut PE out. You can reduce it. There's nothing in the school code that says you have to have 4 hours a week of PE. There's nothing in the school code that says you have to have an elementary band. There's nothing in the school code that says you have to have a high school band. We've chosen to do it.
not like 20 years ago. There was.
Oh, well, it was great then.
You had to have so many hours of this to be able to count it. That they've done away with all that, right?
No, there's
have so many hours of a school year, but
right.
I mean, as a subject.
Yes.
Subject.
No, there's none of that.
20 years ago, you used to have so many hours of a subject to count it, right?
And at the high school level, you only have to do what the district's strategic plan says. There's some people out there that say, you know what, maybe we ought to do away with 12th grade and bring back kindergarten, because the kids, by the time they're in 12th grade, they're ready to go anyway. That's cutting edge thinking, that people are starting to think maybe we ought to be looking at the other end. And kids, as they're getting older, they should be, maybe we would be looking at early release and letting kids out and bringing back stuff at the other end where you really need it developmentally. That's another conversation for another time. But that's where the research is going now and looking at it, because of this is a national problem. It's not just a problem in Pennsylvania or in Daniel Boone. We just, I know I'm getting off topic, but I think it's important to hear everything. And because you asked a good question, you can't get rid of music either. You have to find some way to teach music at the elementary school. It just doesn't have to be an elementary band. That's the distinction. And that's all in, for those of you that are listening, state board regulations under Chapter 4 are the curriculum and instruction regulations that school districts have to follow. We can't make them up. That's a mandate from the state. That's what guides our program. School code does not say you have to offer football. It's not there. Anyone that can find where it says we have to offer an athletic program, I will buy you a new car. It's not there.
I guess we could also suggest to our legislators to mandate full-day kindergarten and pay.
Now that's a different conversation. You're absolutely right. That's a different conversation, and I agree with you. Because we have a lot of expenses that we cannot avoid, we cannot do away with, and again, I'm just repeating myself. PE can't be eliminated. It has to be there.
Just a quick question on the money that's going out for cyber education. When did that legislation get enacted?
1997.
And
it didn't start with the cybers until technology caught up to it. See, back in 1997 when they passed the law, I actually wrote my doctoral dissertation on part of this, so I don't mean to be a geek about this, but in 97 they passed this law. And it was really for brick and mortar charter schools that they thought they would give parents another choice for sending their kids to school. And it was always meant to be done with public money. That's not new. But hardly anybody did that because it was so hard to form a charter school. For those of you that might not know it, we had somebody come to us 3 years ago when I first became superintendent to request to put a charter school in the district. Those have to be run, they need approval through the local school district. We said no. We shot it down, and they couldn't do it. I mean, it was legal for us to do that. We didn't think they had a good financial plan. We didn't think they had a good instructional plan, and they went away. They could have appealed it, but they didn't. But you see, with cyber charters, you can open a cyber charter school in Erie, and a kid from Daniel Boone can hook up with that school in Erie. We have no power to approve or disapprove it, and there goes the money right out the door. That's the injustice.
I'm sorry, I need to get going.
I'm sorry.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, Connor.
I think everybody's in agreement that that's a horrible thing, but my question is, when did the money start going out the door, and how has it increased? Has it increased literally, exponentially?
This is my theory. I think what has happened, there are 3 ways to satisfy. Pennsylvania has a compulsory attendance law. And if you want to end this meeting, I can lecture.
Okay, all right. Let's. So those we can end it now. If there's any more questions about what we originally.
I'm going to answer your question though.
What are your plans to keep band and sports and these activities from going away?
This is just the first.
You have 6 to 9 months.
Right.
If you put people in charge that could try and make decisions and do it, it could possibly be mitigated. If it's announced, if I volunteer to do it, trust me, nobody's going to like it because it'll get done.
I think they're looking for help.
No, yeah, okay. I have no problem doing it, but my theory is we need to start from the bottom up and get all sports into one big giant basket, and it can be funded and maybe even profitable.
Let me say it to you this way. I think my answer to that would be this.
I don't know.
There may be a saving of it this year. And we may, again, maybe the governor will give us more money. Maybe there will be concessions. Maybe the board will decide to raise taxes to the max. I don't know that. I'm only the superintendent. I don't have the power to raise taxes. The board does that. Maybe we'll decide to use fund balance. One way or another, we may save it this year. But I think we need to begin, I think what you're suggesting, the beginning of a long-term conversation so that we're not sitting here every December before Christmas going, oh my God, we're going to lose sports.
Right.
So maybe next year, by this time, maybe we'll save it this year with a quick fix again. But what we're trying to say, and I think I applaud her for doing this, she's trying to say we can't have this conversation every year and having the community out there like this every year. It's not healthy for anybody. So when are we going to start? I think it's the beginning of a long conversation that just started tonight. And I would say we don't have a specific plan at this point because I think you've heard board members represent that if we do get the money, it's back. Mm-hmm. So then that makes it go away. But it doesn't really make the real problem go away.
Ultimately, I think, if we want to bring in new young families to this area and recruit these families to go ahead and be the future of our school system, we have to keep these programs and we have to.
Nobody disagrees with you.
We have to make them not only have but quality programs.
Mm-hmm.
How are we better than the guy next door to us? Because that's going to bring...
Or how are we at least equal?
Right.
Not even worried about being better. How are we at least equal?
Ultimately, that's what's going to put the people back in the neighborhoods.
Absolutely.
Right.
Rather than drive them out because we don't have programs.
I agree with you.
Right.
And that goes back to my other question about cyber schools. How many people have we lost? How many kids have we shipped out the door in the past couple of years?
We don't ship them out. They ship themselves out.
You know what I'm saying. I mean, but by cutting half
They chose to go for...
They have a choice. They are allowed to do it. I don't want to disparage these people. That's their choice. They are allowed to do it. It is completely legal. The injustice that I see in it is that they take $9,000, and the studies have shown that these cyber schools they've got a real huge surplus. And the Auditor General right now is taking a look at it. Jack Wagner, look his name up. He's taking a look at it right now. If they would just say, instead of sending, because the original, I'll go back to my discussion, the charters, there's 3 ways to solve that you can go to school in Pennsylvania. School choice in Pennsylvania means this. You come to a public school, you go to a private school, you homeschool. They've added a 4th option, or you go charter. 3 of those come out of the taxpayer's pocket. 1, the public school. Private school, obviously, you still pay property taxes and send your child to a private school. Charter and cyber school still comes out of your pocket. No one talks about that. It comes out of your public schools allocation. And homeschooling is nothing. Those people are people who choose, mostly for religious reasons and other reasons, they just write their own curriculum at home, and they're allowed to do that in almost all 50 states in the country. So hang on, how many of them are going out? I think I'll just say it's $800,000 worth.
I mean, it hasn't increased over the past couple
Yes, it has gone up terribly.
In the past, 2 years?
In the past 4 years. I had a chart in one of my other PowerPoints a year or two ago. I can, if you give me your name and number, I can send you the information. It's going up.
But has it gone up because our school district quality has gone down?
I would have no way of knowing that. My guess is no, because one of the things that has happened is the students who used to be homeschooled now found out that they can just pick up the phone, call this school, get a nice computer, and do their curriculum. It relieves the parent of because the homeschooling is the parent's really the teacher. When you go to this cyber school, they have found out, because the cyber schools have done a fantastic marketing job. I give them kudos. They found a way to take a pot of money and run with it. But it's your pot of money. Just know that. It's not some funny money that the state has set aside as extra money to do that. It's coming out of Daniel Boone's money, out of Owen J. Roberts' money, out of Exeter Township's money, out of the Reading School Districts, whose ever money, it's being paid by the local taxpayer.
How much per kid?
Every district has a tuition rate.
Okay.
And that tuition rate is the amount of money that we get from the state. It's $9,000 approximately for a regular education student, meaning they don't have an IEP. If you have an IEP and you're labeled special education, it almost doubles. And we have some of those students who go to cyber charters. We're relieved of our responsibility for them programmatically, and they take their money with them. Their money walks. It's like a voucher. It's a blind voucher system that people don't want to, no one wants to call it that. That's what it is. Whether you agree with it or, I'm not here to politicize it. I'm not here to politicize it. I'm telling you, that's the fact. They're taking that money that walks somewhere else, that's a voucher. Call it what you want, that's a voucher. We don't hand you the money directly, but they come looking for it, and they say, here, please send us, we get bills from PA Cyber Academy. Please send us the bills for these 10 kids. Off the money goes. We can't. If we were trying to withhold it, I would get arrested.
Okay. Any more questions other than cyber school for now?
No, this is a good question. I'm happy to answer that. That's a really good question.
But
I kind of get fired up about it because I have certain.
Wrap it up.
I have a certain belief about that whole thing.
Yes.
Just to recap for the purpose of this meeting, which was revenue enhancement for activities, we
Right.
discussed outside advertising and meaning of
I have all the notes.
okay,
Right.
are reducing or increasing our fees and cost reduction of the programs, which you were going to look at, right, Michelle? Mm-hmm. We're trying to cover about $450,000. Will we meet again to discuss the findings of what we have targeted tonight?
If it stays in the Revenue Enhancement Committee, we can always bring it back.
Okay.
Because looking at ways to make money is part of what the Revenue Enhancement Committee does.
And when does it meet? When does revenue enhancement?
Every third Wednesday.
Every third Wednesday?
Yes.
Okay.
So it'll be after the new year.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
All of the committees meet as standing committees. On standing dates.
Is that listed somewhere? I know that on this calendar, your committee of the whole is listed, but the individual committees are not listed.
Depending on the severity of the agenda, sometimes committees will cancel. They don't always meet every month.
Okay.
Facilities has been quiet lately because we haven't had we have some things coming up, so we'll be meeting again.
Is there a place to find that information?
It's always posted on the web.
It is. Okay.
It
So
is.
it's month by month. It's posted in the web.
Mhm.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
As a matter of fact, I just sent a communique out to the board today to set January's meeting dates, so they're almost done.
Great.
Right.
Thank you.
If you have naming instead of just auditorium or stadium, I'd like you to add to that the building itself.
We can do that, and it's in our
Yeah, those
policy.
were just two ideas.
Maybe a hallway.
You can name a classroom. I've heard of places that they name classrooms.
Yeah.
Expand it.
Wings.
Not the stadium or the...
I know, I'm just trying to start with
Hospitals do it all the time.
Right.
I'm just trying to start with something, and then we can grow from there. This is just the beginning. All right. Well,
Shane had a question.
Oh, Shane.
Her.
On cyber schooling.
All right, let me end this, and then we...
I thought we already ended that.
That gentleman?
Person probably that doesn't have a cyber school, but
I do not have a
Okay, I can tell.
The school district seems to be in some dire straits here. $5 million to a fall. We're dipped into about half the reserve. Is the board considering a referendum to exceed the Act 1 index?
They have not over the last, I mean, they have to make that decision every year. They have chosen not to do that at this point. And the last time that was tried in Berks County was when Wyomissing tried one to build a school building, and the referendum failed 92% to 8.
So is that off the table?
No, it's not even on the table yet. Practically speaking, I don't know. The board would have to decide on that. So
we've discussed it only from the timing of when we would have to decide of when the referendum would have to be
sometime in March.
Yeah.
Sometime in March it would have to take place.
So we're aware of it, but we're not proceeding.
Pennsylvania is not a referendum state, even though we have that Act 1. I have heard other superintendents from other states say where that was a regular feature. Almost everything went out to referendum. So Pennsylvania has, even though they passed Act 1 to hold a referendum, there have been very few of them across the state, because generally people turn their thumbs down to saying they're going to raise taxes way above what we could possibly do.
Okay. I'm going to end this meeting. It is, so we have adjourned, and it is almost 8:45.
8:45.
Good enough.